Hi everyone, welcome to Rizzoli Bookstore. I'm Christine, I'm the events manager here. And we're really thrilled to be here tonight to celebrate issue 1 of INQUE magazine. This event has been a long time in the making with Dan Crow, who's the editor of INQUE. He created it together with the designer Matt Willey of Pentagram. We started discussing this last year. I think we had to reschedule like once or twice because of Omicron. So it's especially sad and unfortunate that Dan can't be with us tonight now as he's tested positive for COVID. But he shared a message with me to share with you all, so I'm gonna go ahead and read this message from Dan now. INQUE is a 10-year magazine project which aims to document a crucial decade for us all. It has many of the world's leading writers, photographers, and artists making new work for us, and with no advertising and no digital iteration, it requires you, kind readers, to help keep it going. Some of the few issues left are on sale here today, so please do support if you can. All the contributors to INQUE are at the forefront of our collective endeavors in deciphering our complex times, and these 3 phenomenal authors are some of the most exciting of those. I'm so happy that they're reading new work which will appear in INQUE's 2nd edition. So this, then, is an exciting peek into the fall issue of INQUE. All of this makes the fact that I just tested positive for COVID even harder to take. Basically, I'm just around the corner in a hotel watching movies right now, which is totally bizarre. I am so very sorry I can't be there. I have some sneezing and shivering to get on with. Please have a great evening and send pics. So, nice. Thank you, Dan. Let's go ahead and do as Dan says. Thank you to him for making this happen, and also thanks to Matt, who is with us tonight. So I'll introduce our readers and turn things over to them, but first, after they read, we invite you to join us for a signing at the table over there. We have copies of INQUE available for sale at the register at the front of the store. We have free tote bags if you buy a copy for the first 30 people that do so. And we also have books from our readers for sale at the register. And I can also help you buy a book and buy a magazine here in the salon afterward, just find me. So buy a copy of the magazine, support the bookstore, support INQUE, and I think that covers it. Let me introduce our readers. Catherine Lacey is the author of 4 books, most recently Pew, which won the New York Public Library's Young Lions Award. Her next book is coming out from FSG in 2023. Joyce Carol Oates is one of the most prolific and award-winning writers working in the United States today. She's been awarded the National Medal of Humanities and the National Book Award, among many other honors. And her next novel, Babysitter, is out this August from Knopf. And finally, Kathryn Scanlan is the author of Og9, Fog, and The Dominant Animal. Her 3rd book, Kick the Latch, comes out from New Directions this September. We're so lucky to have all of them here, so please join me in welcoming them, starting with Catherine Lacey.
Hi. Here we are. Thanks for coming out. I'm actually going to read one small part from the issue that exists, and then the thing I think will be in the next INQUE, but we'll see. Okay, this one's called Sandwich. 2 women were discussing the phenomenon of men who, when engaged in a sexual encounter with a woman, would attempt to recreate the images and positions he had seen in pornography. One of the women used to sleep with a man who'd watched quite a lot of pornography, and after one afternoon, mid-coitus, this man had asked her to move her hips in a certain way, and no matter how hard he tried to describe what he desired remained beyond her understanding. The man then fetched his laptop and showed her a clip of another woman, naked atop another man, doing the thing that he wanted this woman to do. The woman studied the footage closely, even lovingly, but concluded that the young woman on screen was a professional, quite pliable, and possessed a skeleton and assemblage of flesh that had about as much in common with her own body as a puppy had in common with a coat rack. Later, they divorced. The other woman complained of a habit that plagued every man in the world, or at least every man with whom she'd gone to bed. At some point during the act, these men would, as if compelled by something primordial, reach down and pull her legs up so that her knees were against her shoulders and her ankles bobbed beside her head. Both women had experienced this gesture on countless occasions, and both women agreed that men did this for the same reason that little boys played with G.I. Joes, that there are times in which imagination seems to make more sense than reality. Had any of those men ever noticed the confounded gazes of the women they just folded in half? There must have been, but how could there be, some powerful pleasure in contorting a woman in this way? If these women had been feeling generous, as women so often are, they might have excused this male tendency as a kind of gratis physical therapy, that all these men had been spontaneously concerned with the tension of their lovers' hamstrings. In practice, however, it often made a woman, or at least these women, feel as if they were a used car of which this man was judiciously kicking the tires. This gesture also called to mind advertisements for deli meats, the way the slices are often depicted as neat folds within a sandwich. Okay, and this little one's called The Sculptor. Next door is where the sculptor lives. She is a middle-aged woman who can sometimes be seen in states of undress through her uncurtained windows, and is also occasionally heard screaming in tones neither of pleasure nor agony on certain clear evenings. We do not fear her, though she gives the neighborhood children a fright when, prompted by their too loud talking as they idle on the sidewalk facing her house, she enters her front porch to admonish them with words beyond their vocabulary, causing the children to scatter silently like tadpoles escaping a hand plunged into their creek. From the looks of her, the sculptor has not yet reached 50, though she dresses with that terrifying disregard of gender that women typically earn through menopause, lesbianism, or doctoral study of philosophy. Thresholds we are mostly sure that the sculptor has not crossed. She boasts about having never set foot in academia, and her face still plumply advertises her uterus. And over the years, the same man has been seen entering her house with suitcases and boxes, and presumably living with her until months later, the same man is noticed carrying his things back out in a fit. So the sculptor was known to us, her neighbors, for her restlessness and her very occasional howling. But to others, she is best known for her sculptures, which have been installed, usually at taxpayer expense, on street corners the whole town over. The bank has purchased the sculptor's largest sculpture and installed it in a drained concrete basin where the fountain had been before the mayor's son drowned in it, drunk, after the town's centennial celebration. The sculptor's sculptures seem appropriate for such uses, to distract us from something or memorialize someone, or both. They are most often wrought of metal and accented with stone, granite or slate, we'd guess, though none of us know anything about stone. Additionally, we must admit, none of us really know anything about art or the language of art. We don't know what conclusion or fact we are supposed to reach when looking at, for instance, a hulking spire of stone and metal piercing the spot in the concrete where that poor boy was found the next morning. How are we even supposed to feel about it? To make matters even more difficult, the sculptor's sculptures are all titled untitled for whatever reason, though most, at least, are dedicated, however cryptically, to specific people, for Winslow, for J.W., for the Chinsky family. We like the idea of dedications, and we think it's human to find ways to honor other humans, but the dedications are not really helpful when it comes to discerning the sculptor's meaning. Surely she must have her meanings. Just last week, a new one was installed outside the barbershop downtown, and several of us went to the ribbon cutting. The plaque under this one read, "Untitled, for my good mother." We heard the sculptor's mother was there at the ceremony, though we didn't see her ourselves. We have been told that after she leaned over to read the plaque, She stood upright with tears in her eyes and said, "Finally." Then, again, someone else told us that as she walked home that afternoon, carrying a piece of the complimentary cake and a napkin, she could be heard muttering, "Good? That's the best she can do?" Thanks.
It's very exciting to be here in this beautiful bookstore, which I've never been in before. This piece that I'm going to read will probably seem to some of you a little bit familiar. It's very much about the feeling that many of us had in March 2020 when we first sort of entered the pandemic and didn't really know where we were going. It was sort of like being in a rudderless boat rushing along some sort of rapidly moving stream, and many of us really had no idea what would happen. So this story is a story from the point of view, not of me, but of a man, and it's written in such a way that each sentence is more or less like floating. It has a kind of a unreal, surreal, disembodied feeling, which I was trying to communicate. I certainly did feel myself at this time. However, though it begins in reality, but it sort of moves in a direction somewhat surreal, or maybe it's prophetic, who knows. This is not a drill. A season of sudden alarms. Scarcely do you dare close your exhausted eyes, and your cell phone erupts. High-pitched rapid buzzing like a maddened hornet. Already the thing is impatient, you haven't rushed to answer. And even as you snatch up the vibrating device with a trembling hand before you can answer, a stern robot voice emerges. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Prepare for an emergency. Your phone. You are of an age to think sentimentally of the device as if it had been created to benefit you. Each alarm is a singular surprise. No alarm seems aware of its precursor. Each alarm is issued by the state in which you reside, which happens to be the state of New Jersey. That there is a network of such states, indeed a, quote, federal government, is not any longer acknowledged. Since precisely when, you can't remember. It's very difficult to remember an omission. That which is missing is likely to be beyond the orbit of language precisely because it has ceased to exist. Initially in October, your phone erupts in a high-pitched buzzing to warn of an approaching rainstorm, gale force winds, traveler's advisory. Soon after, a warning comes of Hurricane Cassandra, power outages, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew. Not long after, flash floods, tornado, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. curfew. Local roads are washed out, the turnpike is shut down, basements are flooded. Deaths are reported of individuals foolish enough to wade through waist-high water. Drownings, heart attacks, electrocutions from fallen wires. Caution, remain indoors until further notice. In January, your phone buzzes with a new emergency. Early warning signs of an imminent health crisis. Soon then, 7 p.m. to 9 a.m. curfew. Public places shut down until further notice. All schools, churches shut down. Masks required even if outdoors. Travelers advisory, avoid all roads. Each day in succession through the early rain-dripping spring, the hours of curfew are reiterated. You notice how the precise hours of the curfew are altered daily, as if with the intention to confuse and discourage. Now beginning at sunset, now at 5 p.m., and now at 3 p.m. Eventually at noon, eventually 24 hours. Public health bulletins mandates, stay indoors. In the streets, random figures, distant cries, gunfire. Barricades, police vehicles, gunfire. Red trimmed skies, clouds like misshapen tumors. Frantic fleeing birds striking your windows, falling dead to the ground. So often is your phone buzzing with emergency alarms, you hide it beneath cushions. Still, the muffling buzzing can't be ignored. By the time you reach it, the robot voices warning of martial law, 24-hour curfew, violators at risk of being shot on sight. This is not a drill. Weeks, months pass, the emergency alarms vary, but the curfew now remains constant. 24-hour, no exceptions. Huddling in your cave, sobbing, grateful when power is restored, ravenously hungry when food is finally delivered. By state mandate, retail stores are closed to individual customers. Food and other supplies are delivered exclusively by licensed services at exorbitant prices which only the privileged can afford. Oh, you are one of the privileged. You have escaped fires, floods, virus, starvation, rioting. At first you communicate with other privileged in your circle of friends, but as time passes, these other privileged have slowly vanished. Emails sent into the void are not received, or if received are not answered. Ever more frequently, emails are returned as undeliverable. Cell phones commandeered by authorities are no longer used for private calls. TV news is recycled. Later than you realize you've been seeing the same videos, hearing the same weather catastrophe reports for hours. Online news is redacted, sites have been removed. Click onto a familiar link and discover it is vanished. Staring at the computer screen, which vanishes into a tiny white dot, amid a great gaping black hole that surrounds it and swallows it. Black screen, dead screen, the electronic device overheating begins rapidly to cool. A haze of ennui palpable as wood smoke has settled over the state. The turnpike, the Garden State Parkway, state highways, and smaller local roads are deserted. Where floodwaters have receded, bodies of drowned animals and occasional human beings are discovered. Everywhere, skeletons of birds. Shopping malls are deserted, stores are darkened and shuttered. Roaming gangs of looters and vandals are a plague. The New Jersey National Guard has been mobilized to shoot on sight. Deaths from the virus, pandemic, morgues overflowing, bodies stacked in freezing units and warehouses, funeral pyres. Airborne ashes were romantically reimagined as wood smoke. Your connection with the external world has been almost exclusively virtual. It's not entirely clear whether the external world exists or whether it is itself virtual. You neglect to mark the calendar, you've lost track of days. For what is a day but the equivalent of its predecessor and its successor? Not a day, but rather the day. One morning you discover that the interior space in which you live has shrunken considerably. A corridor that once led to several rooms leads now to just two. A door that had opened into a room now opens into a closet. There are fewer windows, less light is admitted. Mail service has long since ceased. UPS, FedEx, you've seen delivery trucks abandoned in ditches. Municipal services like trash pickup, snow removal, road repair, scarcely a memory. Elections? What were elections? You have no idea if there are still elected officials or who they might be. Townships, state, federal governments, do these still exist? Obscurely, it's understood that those who succumb to floods, fires, and virus and bullets must have done something to deserve their fate, even as you, who managed to avoid these, deserve your privileged fate of not being afflicted. You see in a mirror, you become a mountain man, wild hair, whiskers sprouting from your chin, eyes glistening with the jocose sort of terror. You've forgotten your name, that is the sweet diminutive you've been called by people who'd once known you. The state only knows your legal name, surname, and first name and middle initial, which you're accustomed to seeing, and printed materials, the sight of which suffuses you with an obscure guilt. You live in terror of being summoned by the state, even as you're uncertain if there still remains a state. You've forgotten how to walk upright. You devised a clever way to sit in a desk chair with little wheels and drag yourself with your feet along the hall and back again, and along the hall and back merrily to many a storm last night. Singing to yourself, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, an old sweet melody. You always hurt the one you love. One morning the sky is mostly red as the interior of a lawn. There's a romantic smell of wood smoke in the air. A wild caprice comes to you. You will venture outdoors. First time outdoors in how long? Behind the sprouting whiskers, you seem to have grown no older. Yet you've lost your youth. Your skin, once ruddy, has become pale and thin as onion skin and smells like camphor. Eyes once clear and hopeful, threaded with broken capillaries. Can't bear it, you think, not an hour longer. As dusk approaches, slip from the rear door of your residence. Your legs ache with the strain, your back aches. You're not accustomed to standing upright. The sky, pebble-colored, glowing with a smoldering sort of light, is oppressively large overhead, like an umbrella that does not cease opening. In the road, a rumbling sound, a tank passing, laborious as a giant tortoise. The rolls out palpable from heavy tanks. Out here you've been warned there's a risk of suicide bombers, arson, earthquakes, martial law, shoot on sight. Mass cremations, hundreds of thousands of bodies burning across the continent. It's rumored that the county landfill a few miles away on Hill Road has been converted into an open-air crematorium. Ashes clogging your nostrils, eyelashes. How many days since you have touched anyone? Since anyone has touched you? Looked at you urgent in intimacy up close. You'd been a teacher, high school, public, or had that been something you'd seen on TV or a dream? Oh, vaguely you recall large classes, 5 rows of desks, 6 students in each row, 30 students? Staring eyes, what was the subject? So long ago, chalk in your hand, a green board, stark white chalk. Mr. What had they called you? Had they laughed at your jokes? Mr. something beginning with H. Actually, you'd been happy there in the classroom, and the kids, before the armed guards in the corridor and the checkpoints, it seemed to like you. Mr. H. In the wet, cold, ashy air, you wander open mouthed, breathing deeply, willing to be humbled, humiliated. Will no one ever touch you again? Will you never touch anyone again? Any risk for a touch, you think. Your knees wobble like drunks. Your heart is a fluttering little chickadee. There's a sound of booted feet in pavement. A young uniformed soldier has sighted you. In his camouflage fatigues and boots. Rapidly he approaches with a bayonet. His face is hidden by a dark mask that covers forehead, nose, mouth, leaving only his raw young eyes exposed. You are heedless daring. You will have only the singular chance. Lifting your hand, yearning to be touched, or in self-defense to ward off the glinting blade. Lifting your eyes, yearning to be seen. The young soldier has paused staring at you. He tugs at the mask, exposing his mouth. Mr. Halloran, Jesus, is that you? Josh, one of your students, shocked by the sight of you. Quickly with the bayonet, Josh motions for you to get away, run. Embarrassed as any adolescent confounded by the behavior of an adult who should know them. Blindly you reach out, Josh swipes at you with a bayonet. Mr. Halloran, no. He's serious, you see, yet you would stand your ground, you would shut your eyes and surrender. Don't make me do this, Mr. Halloran, okay? But Go away. Those eyes fixed upon you, okay, you will limp back home. Broken, humble, relieved not to be bayoneted. ashes sifting into your eyes, wept in riblets down your cheeks. You're scarcely aware of the rumbling of tanks, vibrating earth that threatens to open beneath your feet. Panting, cowering. For it's the way of the coward to leap back to the safety of the cave, to shut and lock the door behind you, to exist. Still, that look in Josh's face, love. And even if not, enough.
Hello. Does that sound okay? I am also a Jennifer. At work, I'd given my boss her coffee in a dirty cup, touched every peanut butter cluster in the common bag with unwashed hands, eaten my coworker's avocado in the bathroom with a spoon and salt shaker, and hit send on an email in which I told a customer to get a life. On the way home, I parked at the head of the nature trail near my apartment and switched my hard-heeled loafers for the bright orange sneakers I'd recently bought. The sneakers were constructed of a spongy, synthetic material that smelled like chemical death with candy undertones, but I felt instantly fit when I stood up. I was taller, too. Their thick foam footbeds gave me an extra inch from which to look down on my surroundings. I hit the path at a reckless clip. Roughly, I knocked shoulders with a young man, the outermost member of a rowdy group approaching from the opposite direction, when I refused to cede my narrow lane of dirt. Emboldened, I barreled forward, but as soon as I congratulated myself on my pace and progress, the shoe on my right foot began to rub. I stopped at the side of the trail and undid my laces. I put a hand against the nearest tree for support. On the back of my bare ankle was a peeled, bloody place that burned, and on the lining of my new shoe was a big red soap spot. The maudlin, shop-worn tunes of my mind jerked to life. Poor me, why even try? I'm in pain. Coming toward me on the path strode an animated pair, a curvaceous woman in sand-colored leggings and a black-clad man in orange-tinted glasses. Oh no, the woman said, laughing. Jennifer would never do that. I know, said the man, and the way he said it made me understand Jennifer to be a selfish and deluded individual who lacked courage and the capacity for change. Because I am also a Jennifer, I lowered my eyes in shame. When they'd gone, I looked to where my palm still pressed the tree's flank, which was freshly stripped. The tender new skin was smooth, creamy, purplish pink, like an elderly woman's stockinged legs, and it rippled a little at the crooks and knots, like a stocking will wrinkle around ankles and knees. At the base of the tree lay its old, coarse brown bark. As I continued to think of the stockinged legs, the rest of the woman came to me. She walked along a crowded boardwalk beneath a paper parasol, wearing a knit skirt and a printed headscarf. She observed the sky, the sea, the heaped up trash bins, the gull shit. The air around her smelled like brine and fish and fried dough and sunscreen and sewage. This woman bought an ice cream cone from a cart vendor and ate it. And after that, she slipped off her shoes and walked across the sand toward the edge of the water, not even minding the little grains that pushed through the soles of her hose and stayed there, rubbing and rattling around until evening, when she returned to her apartment. There, she removed the stockings gently, rinsed them carefully in the sink, and hung them over the side of her tub to dry. One by one, all the slower people I'd passed reappeared. They shuffled by my bent figure with smug expressions, but I said, "Godspeed," because I suddenly remembered why I'd come. I tied my handkerchief around my raw ankle, relaced my shoe, and continued, slower now, and now I forced myself to smile at the people I saw. They had headphones on. They were talking or scrolling on their phones. They looked away quickly, with eyes that were fearful. I could feel the stiffness in my face, my fakery, and thought them correct to ignore me. Nevertheless, I kept at it, and after a while, something did loosen in my head or neck or chest, a crevice enough to cram my fingers into. I pried at my ill-fitting peel, then pitched what slipped off into the scrub. I hoped it might benefit some bitter-loving garbage eater, or the mushrooms who diligently, intelligently digest whatever we dump on them. After that, I flashed my big white teeth with feeling. Thanks.